It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the three movies of November 2nd, 2007. Today we've got Ridley Scott's latest film with Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe reuniting for the first time since Virtuosity. Jerry Seinfeld stars in a movie where he plays a bee, and John Cusack has a movie where he has to take care of a child that may or may not be from another planet. I don't remember this last movie that we have here, but let's get right to it. And of course, this is only a couple of days after Halloween, which means the holiday movie season is upon us. All these big blockbuster family movies that everyone's going out to see. And the first film that we have here clearly is a movie that's perfectly tailored for all those families to go out, take the kids out of their costumes from Halloween, and into the movie theater to go see this first film. That's right, come on kids, let's grab the Halloween candy, sneak it into the theater, and watch American Gangster, the perfect family film to start the holiday season. Of course, I am totally kidding on all those levels, but yes, American Gangster is the first film that we have here, and as you can see, it's Denzel Washington and Ridley Scott working together for the first time since Virtuosity. Their careers have definitely been very different since that movie came out. Denzel Washington has now 2 Academy Awards instead of just 1. Russell Crowe has won as well, and has gone way from where he was in Virtuosity to now becoming the distinctive actor that he is nowadays, except also for the fact that he's also kind of a psychotic nut job at times too. But in this film, you have a story that's based on the story of It's based on the criminal career of Frank Lucas, who's played by Washington, and he smuggles heroin into the United States on American service planes returning from the Vietnam War before being detained by a task force led by Detective Richie Roberts, played by Russell Crowe. In the movie, you also have Josh Brolin, Ted Levine, Chiwetel Ejiofor, Norman Reedus, Ruby Dee, and Cuba Gooding Jr. among the cast in here too. And really, there's not much more you can really add to this film that hasn't already been said about it. It's a great film. It's definitely one of my favorite Ridley Scott movies, and one of my favorite movies of all time. Here you have 2 actors at the top of their game, Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe, giving easily their best performance of the decade, and director Ridley Scott delivering his best directorial effort in years with this movie. And it's a good thing I'm talking about this, because I've been giving Ridley Scott a bad rap in the last year or so, because, yeah, I admit it, a lot of his movies recently have not been that great. In fact, most of them have been downright terrible. I mean, a lot of people like The Last Duel. I didn't like that one. I kind of liked House of Gucci. I didn't like Napoleon. I didn't like Gladiator 2. The best thing he's done in the last came out almost 10 years ago, and that was The Martian. Well, actually, this October will be 10 years ago, but yeah, that's 10 years ago for a director who is a well-recognized and well-appreciated director on all levels. I mean, this is the guy that really changed the game for many, many movies. I mean, yeah, I've talked about his great works, the Alien, Warriors, Blade Runner, Black Rain, a lot of his movies that I liked in the past, and yeah, I've been harsh on him the last couple of years, but it's only because I love this guy's work from the past, and it just feels like he's repeating himself so many times, and it's great that I finally get to talk about a movie like this, because it shows that here's a guy that still has a lot of ability to tell an intriguing story here, and this is a really good story to tell here, and it's a very good movie, and it shows what Ridley Scott is capable of doing, and I kind of wish he'd go back to doing stuff like this and The Martian, revitalize the game, do something that's not just repeating the same stuff you've done over and over and over again. And yeah, I mean, Washington and Crowe have had other great performances in the decade. Both were great in Training Day and A Beautiful Mind, which, yeah, they were 2 films that almost could have made the list for the best of the decade. But this movie is still one that I still love going back to. It's a great movie, even at 3 hours long. American Gangster is a very entertaining and enjoyable film with strong supportive performances from the rest of the cast. Great character development, fantastic set pieces. They do a great job of bringing you back to this time period when these guys were doing their jobs and all that. And it's a shame that the film didn't get more award recognition. It only got 2 Oscars, one for art direction and then a supporting actress Oscar for Ruby Dee, who plays Denzel's mother in this. But you could have easily given Washington and Scott and Crowe Oscar nominations for this, easily. But it's probably the best movie of its kind since Scarface. And if you have not seen this movie, see this movie. It is definitely one of Ridley Scott's greatest achievements. It's definitely one of Denzel Russell's best performances. It's a great movie. I can't recommend it enough. American Gangster is a great movie. So, yeah, I kind of screwed around with you with saying that this is a great family film, but here's the real family film that came out this weekend, that wonderful, wonderful movie from DreamWorks Animation. Let's take a look at their latest film, B-Movie. Ah, yes, B-Movie. The movie that became the meme, that was literally all over the place over 10 years after its initial release. And yeah, there were a lot of videos coming out about, there was a lot of memeable stuff in this movie that eventually made its way to the internet. And, it made me wonder, was this movie ahead of its time, or was it just a movie that people just meme for the sake of memeing? And, but you saw there with those trailers, with that trailer early on, the teaser for this was very much, a film that was basically an odd teaser to say the least, where it was basically saying that, this was basically their idea of selling the movie as a live action film. I mean, you've got cameos by Chris Rock, Eddie Izzard, Steven Spielberg, a pre-crazy Zachary Levi, but yeah, what a lot of people don't remember about B-Movie is that it's the first major scripted project from Jerry Seinfeld since Seinfeld had ended 9 years prior. And granted, he had made guest spots on shows like Mad About You, Dilbert, Curb Your Enthusiasm, but unlike his Seinfeld co-stars, he never did any starring TV or movie projects except for, stand-up specials and then the documentary Comedian, which we've talked about before. So this was a pretty big deal for Seinfeld to come back, and he made people make sure that they knew he was coming back. And boy, did he ever, because Seinfeld was, of course, on NBC. NBC helped to generate the buzz, no pun intended, on this movie, including 30 Rock doing an episode where basically Jerry Seinfeld was, Dak Donaghy, played by Alec Baldwin, and had this idea to have Jerry Seinfeld plastered into all the NBC shows. So you see him in Law and Order Special Victims Unit, you see him in Heroes, you see him in Deal or No Deal, and then Jerry Seinfeld had to come in and tell him to stop doing that. And it's a great episode. It's definitely one of the funnier episodes they've done. But on top of that, there's a NBC had these B-movie TV juniors, if you will. They were basically little comedy shorts in which Seinfeld would have these little 3-minute segments that would air in the middle of the NBC Thursday lineup. I mean, they were really promoting this movie big time. I mean, it may have not led to it becoming a massive hit. Not that it did do bad business. It still brought in over $287 million worldwide, and it was definitely a profitable film for DreamWorks Animation, but it wasn't the Madagascar Shrek-style hit that I think the studio was hoping for. And it got beat out, of course, by American Gangster on that same weekend. It did eventually get the #1 spot the next weekend, but yeah. But what about the movie itself? The actual plot of the movie is bonkers on its own levels, because the story of this movie is that you have Jerry Seinfeld is a bee, Barry B. Benson, who is suing the human race for exploiting bees after learning that his florist friend Vanessa, played by Renee Zellweger, that humans sell and consume honey. So yeah, the story does not sound exciting. It sounds very cliche plot-wise, but when you watch the movie again, they do try to stem away from a lot of the cliches you would expect, like in the beginning. Barry and his friend Adam, played by Matthew Broderick, run into a group of pollen jocks, bees who collect pollen and flowers outside the hive. The jocks offer to take Barry outside the hive for a flower patch that he accepts. And you think they're going to be like complete dicks about it. And the next day, Barry shows up, and then they're just like, hey, it's cool, we'll take him out. And I was glad that we were kind of steering away from much of those cliches that could have come up in a movie like this. They do have a couple moments here and there, but it's not enough for the movie to be ruined by. There are several subplots in the film that do get really pushed off to the side throughout the course of the film. Like the whole thing in the beginning about how the bees have to have their job immediately after they graduate. Never mentioned again. The whole thing about Barry dating Vanessa, which is something that actually happens in this movie. A human falls in love, dates a bee in this movie, but it's never mentioned again. Her kind of having somewhat an affair with the bee over her husband, played by Patrick Warburton, never mentioned again. A lot of these arcs they try to build in this movie, they just go off into the distance and they never come back. And it dings the film, and it could have easily dismantled the film's hopes and dreams in any way, shape, or form. But what carries the film overall are those few key elements, the animation. While it's not quite up to DreamWorks' higher standards, it's still impressive to look at. There are times when they can still get a lot of the human faces done. I mean, Ray Liotta in this movie is an example. Like, they still can't get some of the faces down. Ray Liotta in this is a big example, which is a really, really pointless joke, But when they show the flying scenes in this, they do look pretty impressive, and the humor is surprisingly really funny. There are those obvious bee puns they feel like they gotta throw in there just because they feel obligated to, but overall, a lot of the humor in this did make me laugh pretty hard. There's a hilariously cruel joke involving Winnie the Pooh and Piglet that made me laugh pretty hard. And there's even some jokes that I think most kids would not get, but even the adults kind of would, but they're still very obscure, like Ray Liotta. He has to be on he's testifying in court, and Barry's just like, congratulations on your Emmy win for Law and Order or something like that. It's just like, why is this in the movie? I don't know. I don't even think they know what they're doing, but yeah. The cast is very good too here. You got a lot of people who are... Jerry Seinfeld seems very committed to the project. There's never a point where he feels like he's embarrassed by what he's doing, and he does surprisingly have some pretty good chemistry with Renee Zellweger, even though it's a very weird subplot. He is at least trying. There are moments where they are working off each other very well, and you also have a lot of good voice work in here. Megan Mullally, Larry Miller, Patrick Warburton, Chris Rock, Matthew Broderick, John Goodman, Rip Torn, Larry King, Barry Levinson, Kathy Bates, Oprah Winfrey. Everybody is used very well here. So, is B-Movie kind of an underrated masterpiece, maybe? I won't go as far as saying that, but but I do think it's one of the more lesser-known good DreamWorks movies. Unlike a movie like Shark Tale, which the movie definitely has a lot of that feel to it, but there's at least more in here that works a lot better than Shark Tale does. From the animation, from the voice work, from the humor. B-Movie just comes off as a better made movie, and I think what hurts it is the overhyped marketing, which the marketing campaign was great for it, but it made that seem like the film was going to be the second coming of Jesus. And when you're stacking up that high and putting it on that high of a pedestal, you better come out with the gate with where all bets are off. Like, you got to be like the Simpsons movie. And unfortunately, the Simpsons movie doesn't fall into that same kind of trap here, because they overhyped that movie. And it's a good movie. It's a really good movie, but it could have been so much bigger and much better than what they ended up doing with it. But I would definitely say give it another watch, and you might actually be surprised at what the movie actually was and actually works about it. It's an overall good DreamWorks animated movie that's gotten lost in the shuffle, mostly because of the memeable stuff that comes from it, but it's weird, but in a fun kind of weird. It's kind of reminding of something like a movie that we just talked about recently, like Flight Risk, or some of these really bad, really so bad it's good movies that we... Like, it's not on that level, but it definitely feels like it's close enough to that level where it's just like, it's worth checking out just to see how bizarre it is. And if you go into it knowing that you're going to be chaotically impressed by it, I think you'll have a good time with it overall. So anyway, after all that, let's go ahead and move on to a movie that is not chaotically interesting or exciting in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it's pretty boring from what I remember from it. Last film we have here, and that is Martian Child. Yeah, this is a movie that I very rarely remember, and maybe that's because the movie itself is not memorable by any means necessary. You have a story about John Cusack as a writer who adopts a strange young boy who believes himself to be from Mars. You have Amanda Peet as the love interest in here, and John's sister Joan Cusack is in the film as well. And this is a story we've seen done so many times before in the past, and sometimes you get a good story out of it if it actually works out very well with isn't doing something a little bit different from it. But from what I remember from this movie, because it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, and I instantly completely forgot about it after I was done watching it. It's been years, and looking back on the trailer again, it's just like, yep, I'm starting to realize why I didn't like this movie in the beginning, and yeah. I can't say it's any good now. But then again, it's also not helping the fact that this was a film that was shot all the way back in May 2005 and was sitting on a shelf for several years and was on getting its release date pushed back, which is almost never a good sign. This means that the movie they knew was bad from the beginning, and they had no idea how to take care of it, because this has a $27 million budget. It didn't even make a third of that back. But yeah, it's not a very good movie, even though there's a great cast all across the board here. Cusack, Peet, Sophia Okinoto, we've seen in stuff like Aeon Flux, and Joan Cusack, Oliver Platt, Howard Hessman, Richard Sheath, Angelica Houston in here. A lot of good people in the film, but unfortunately, there's just nothing there. There's just nothing about the film that makes it worth it, and it's lifeless, it's boring, you don't like any of the characters, it's a melodramatic mess of a movie. It's a film that is just it doesn't know what kind of a film it wants to be either. Why is it called Martian Child? Just because the kid's from Mars, is the kid thinks he's from Mars. Okay, well, what's the point of all this? And yeah, it just didn't work for me. It's just a film that's just really, really lifeless, has nothing of value to it whatsoever, and there's just nothing about it that makes it worth it in the end. It's a boring film. It's been years since I've seen it, but from what I remember from it, I was bored from the get-go, and I have no intentions whatsoever to ever go back and watch this movie ever again. So yeah, you could skip Martian Child. And so, with all that said, we're going to wrap up this edition of Time About the Movies. And the next time we meet, we've got 4 more movies to look at, including the big holiday Christmas comedy release, Vince Vaughn and Paul Giamatti and Fred Claus, Tom Cruise, Meryl Streep, and Robert Redford starring in yet another movie that's pretty much anti-war, Alliance for Lambs, notable for being from that time when Tom Cruise actually bought United Artists and ran the company. There was actually that point in time when that happened. We'll talk about that next time around. We'll also talk about the horror film P2, and also we have the Best Picture winner for 2007 at the Oscars, Joel and Ethan Coen's No Country for Old Men. The very polarizing No Country for Old Men, at least it was back then, but does it still warrant that nowadays? Well, we'll check and see on the next episode, so check out that one tomorrow. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please go ahead and hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and hit that like button, subscribe button, the notification button, and the bell, because you get updates on when new videos come out, and we do post new videos here every day. Now, with all that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.